our story is extremely old, and it starts around 13,000 years ago, when the people of ancient Mesopotamia were using beer for the very first time. Beer is basically bread turned into liquid. They put grains in water and leave it to ferment. When you give it time, the sugar separates from the grains and the yeast inside the water start feeding on the sugar. And when the yeast eats sugar, they create ethanol, which is basically alcohol. When the alcohol is produced, the beer is ready. With the same grain you make beer with, you could also make bread with it. And that is why some people call beer liquid bread with a hint of alcohol. A lot of historians believe the reason ancient people started farming wasn't because of bread, but because of beer. Because in terms of food, they would rather hunt their food and eat meat, not a bread that doesn't have more nutrition than meat. Beer is so ancient that most people believe that it came before bread, and that is why we can't 100% say which came first. But what we're sure of is that 13,000 years ago, ancient farmers were making beers with these grains. Organized farming in ancient times basically formed the first civilization. It didn't start off with civilization. When you get organized, you first form a community. Any ancient civilization you look at all starts with farming. A lot of farmers got together, created a village, then they created cities. Between them, they chose a leader, and the first civilizations were formed this way. Before there was organized farming, there were no civilizations either. As you already know, the first civilization in history started in Mesopotamia, between the two rivers of Tigris and Euphrates, and in Egypt next to the Nile River. Both places have a lot of water, great weather, and great soil for farming, the best foundation for a civilization. These were the things that ancient historians wrote about. But the oldest thing that was written about beers came from the Sumerians around 3000 BC, meaning around 5,000 years ago. They wrote about beer and bread, and they also talked about consuming both at the same time. A few centuries after this, ancient Egyptians write about beer as well. It seems like the Egyptians loved beer way more than the Sumerians because they wrote more about it. And another cool thing is, they have found beer in ancient tombs. In ancient Egyptian tombs, alongside a lot of valuable things, they also left beer for their dead. Producing and drinking beer continues for thousands of years, but nobody really knew what would happen to the beer so it would become alcoholic. They just knew they had to mix these materials and they'll get beer eventually. But when we get to the 19th century, Louis Pasteur, the scientist, realizes what happens that beer is made. In ancient times, they would think God is producing beer, and they would think the gods add alcohol to it. The first ancient parties with beer was performed by the Egyptians, a ceremony called Tech, and it basically means getting drunk, a day where everybody drinks beer. The Egyptians loved beer so much that they had their own goddess for it, the goddess of Ninkasi. You guys are most likely familiar with the Hammurabi Code. Well, one of the first rules written on here is that beer should be kept at a low price so everybody can buy it. So can you only produce beer with grains? In the Middle East, yes, but ancient Chinese civilization used rice to do this. They probably called it rice beer. But why doesn't beer head towards Europe? The only reason is that they hated it. Ancient Romans and Greeks hated beer, and the only acceptable drink rather than water was wine. The first Europeans that eventually used beer were the Celts, and you could consider them ancient Irish, but they were in Western Europe back then. And a few centuries after the Celts, the ancient Germania used to drink beer, and they really fell in love with this drink. They loved it so much that when Western Roman Empire collapsed and the Holy Roman Empire was created by the Germans, beer became the most popular drink in Europe. Our video about the Holy Roman Empire is on our channel if you would like to check it out. The Holy Roman Empire had weird rules. One of them was that no women can brew beer, and if they do, they're a witch, and that is why you would only find men brewing beer. The church would say if women brew beer, they're considered witch, and that is why no woman dared to make beer, because if you were a witch, you would be set on fire. When we get to the 15th century, the city of Hamburg is the biggest exporter of beer, and they had created one of the first beer factories in the world. The stats that's available says that the city of Hamburg used to export 30 million liters of beer per year. Middle Easterners and Europeans used grains to make beer. The Chinese use rice. But there was another ancient civilization that was on the other side of the world, the Inca Empire in South America. Did they also make beer? Yes, they had their own type of beer, corn beer. If you didn't know, corn originated from modern-day Mexico and it was all over the Americas. Another interesting fact about the corn beer that the ancient Americans used to make was called chicha, and nowadays it still has the same name. So if you find corn beer, it's gonna be called chicha. Another interesting fact about the Inca Empire was that the corn beer or chicha was used as currency, and instead of exchanging money for work or goods, you would exchange chicha. Like if someone wanted some wheat, they would trade chicha for it, or if they would work or do something, they would be paid in chicha. One of the most advanced civilizations in the Americas were the Incas, and some historians believe the reason that they were so successful is that the people loved chicha, and that would motivate them to continue working so they can get the chicha they need. Just because of the chicha made the Incas have a strong economy and be more powerful than the other civilizations in North and South America. In the American Revolutionary War, the war that the Americans fought Britain for their independence, the American soldiers that fought would get 1 liter of beer per day, and that is why a lot of people will volunteer to fight just for that 1 liter of beer. We finally reached the year 1920, when US is 144 years old, and they realize that most of the population have turned into alcoholics, and that is why in the same year the government bans alcohol using and selling, called prohibition. After that, you couldn't find alcohol in any stores. If you wanted to buy it, you would have to buy it from gangsters and mafia groups, and it would be much more expensive. If the authorities caught you, you would go to jail as well. This rule stays for 13 years, and then eventually, the US government starts researching to see what's happening, and they realized that banning alcohol not only did it make the alcoholic numbers rise, it also made mafia groups and gangsters rich from it. You could say the use of alcohol had gone up rather than down, and that is why in the year 1933, they finally made alcohol legal again. They legalized alcohol once again, but they put some hefty rules behind it. Like for example, if a store or bar sells someone under 21 alcohol, they would be temporarily closed or permanently shut down. It's the same for cigarettes. Right now, beer is sold worldwide. Every year, 190 liters of beer is drunk around the world. And after water, tea, and coffee, beer is the most consumed drink in the world. But let's get to the main point. What will alcohol do to our bodies? Is it good for us or no? Doctors believe that a small amount of beer is good for your heart and arteries. It could lower your blood sugar. It also has different types of vitamin in beer. Vitamin A, vitamin B12, vitamin E, vitamin D, and vitamin K. But doctors say you shouldn't drink the alcohol for the vitamins that's inside it, because the amount of vitamin one bottle of beer will give you is not enough for you to continue drinking. And if you want to drink a lot of beer to get the maximum amount of vitamins, then you're just drinking too much beer. The first problem with drinking too much beer is becoming addicted to it. If someone drinks it every day, they're most likely going to create a habit called alcoholism. If you drink too much beer or any alcoholic drink, you will damage your liver. You have to know that it's the alcohol of the beer that does the damage. Wine and other hard alcohols will do the same damage. But the good thing about beer is that it has low alcohol in it, and it's better to drink it rather than hard alcohol like vodka. Another reason that beer is not that great is that it makes you fat because it has a lot of carbohydrates, and carbohydrates is found a lot in breads and rice. Carbohydrates makes you fat and gives you a belly, and that is why people that drink a lot of beer have a beer belly. This was basically the pros and cons of beer. Some people say that beer is really good for you and it's healthy, but it's not like that. Either way, if you choose to drink beer, please drink responsibly.